Hi and welcome to Stories and Stuff. Today's video is for parents with lots of tips on how to help your children read the tricky words. We thought it'd be really useful to do a video like this, especially at the moment because we've got staggered drop-off and pick-up times and parents aren't allowed on the school site. So it's really tricky to get to talk to parents about some of the things we'd like you to do with your children, and I know some of the parents in my class have asked for some tips. So hopefully this is useful. Tricky words, or they're often known as high frequency words or common exception words. They're the words that are really, really useful. They come up time and time again in children's reading. So it's words like I, to, go, the. We call them tricky words because they can't be sounded out, and I'll go into that in a second. Our reception teachers call them camera words, which I think is a really good idea, because the concept of it is you kind of take a picture of it with your eyes and then you've got to try and remember it. And that's the crux of these words really. You can't sound them out. So if you take the word some, for example, if you were to sound that out in reception, you would say s, o, m, e, some. And you don't get anywhere near some. And even for children that have learnt that split digraph, the O and the E together, they would sound out s, om, som. So in the case of words like some, you've just got to know that that says some. One of the key messages really, is that children need to see and read the word lots and lots of times, and to not encourage them to do any sounding out. Sounding out is a really useful skill when we're reading, but with these words you can't sound them out. So if a child doesn't know the word and they go to sound it out, just stop them and tell them the word. I don't always say that as a tip for reading. Quite often in reading, if a child is struggling on a word, it's good to just wait and give them some time to try and solve it themselves. But in the case of tricky words, if they're starting to sound it out, then jump in and give them the word straight away. For a word to become a known word, that means, it sticks in your brain and you know it. Children need to read it correctly, probably around 100 times. If you've got children with language difficulties or dyslexia, they need to read it a lot more than that. So the key to working with tricky words is building in activities where the children are reading it lots and lots of times very, very quickly. And then, in a few sessions you can build up and they'll have read that word 50 times. Another thing with tricky words is we want to build up what's known as automaticity, which means basically as soon as a child sees the word they can read it automatically without giving it a second thought. So even if you've practiced lots of times and the child knows it when they think about it, it's still worth practicing, so it becomes so easy, that they don't need to think about it at all, they just know it. When children are starting to learn new tricky words, I would definitely limit the number of words they're trying to learn at the same time. If you're trying to learn 10 words, that's really difficult, that's an awful lot of stuff to try and remember. Whereas if you're just learning 2 or 3, that's far easier. The other bit of advice for tricky words is not to pick words that look similar. So if you take, for example, the words he, her, here, they look really, really similar. The beginnings of all those words is the same, and the children are going to end up in a right muddle if you pick those. So it's always good to pick 2 or 3 words that look very different and don't start with the same letters. Equally with the words saw and was, it's really common for children to get them muddled up. And what we really want to secure with the children is that you read a word from left to right. So we want them to look really carefully at that initial sound, that first letter. If you're working on stuff like was and saw at the same time, that doesn't really help secure that direction because was is saw backwards and vice versa. Once a child's getting to know some of these tricky words quite well, the other thing that's worth doing is showing the word with a capital letter and showing a word without a capital letter. Obviously the capital at the start, not the whole word in capitals. That's because some of our capitals look very different to the lowercase letters. So a word like the, which often comes at the start of a sentence, it looks very different when it's in the middle of a sentence. That's why you might have a child that can read the in the middle of a sentence, but when it's at the beginning, they don't know what it is. So it's definitely worth practicing a tricky word with the capital at the beginning and the lowercase at the beginning. And you could do games with just those 2 versions of the same word. For lots of tricky word game ideas, click here.